For 10 years, a man lived inside a shopping mall without anyone knowing. This story seems like something out of a movie script or an urban legend, but the most surprising thing is that it really happened. And the most bizarre thing is how he managed to fool security cameras, private security guards, and an entire system built to keep people like him away from that place. His name was Daniel, but he spent most of that decade being nothing more than a ghost hidden between walls, technical corridors, and forgotten rooms of one of the largest shopping malls in a large city in southern Brazil. It all started in 2009. Daniel was a newly graduated architect who worked for a construction company that provided services to the mall. At the time, he had a good salary, lived alone, and it seemed like his life was finally getting back on track. But it only took a few months for everything to fall apart. The company went bankrupt, he lost his job, and since he had financed a small apartment, he ended up in debt up to his neck. With the economic crisis and the market at a standstill, Daniel was unable to find another job. He was evicted and, instead of seeking shelter with relatives or sleeping on the streets, he made an unthinkable decision. He returned to the place where he had worked, the shopping mall, and decided that it would be there, amidst the unbridled consumption and the noisy routine of hurried customers, that he would hide. He knew all the behind-the-scenes details of that mall. He knew which corridors were not monitored, where the least used emergency exits were, which maintenance doors were never locked. And it was in one of these corridors, between an air conditioning room and an old, disused warehouse, that he began to set up his secret apartment. At first, it was just an old mattress and a backpack with clothes. But as time went by, Daniel adapted the space. He used abandoned partitions to build a false wall, installed a lamp with an improvised battery, and clandestinely connected wires to the mall's electrical grid. During the day, he mingled with the customers. He walked between stores, observed people, and listened to conversations. Sometimes he ate whatever he found in the trash at the food court or used forgotten promotional coupons to get a meal. He was invisible. He dressed like a regular customer, never drew attention to himself, and knew exactly when the security team changed shifts. No one suspected a thing. Over time, Daniel learned the employees' habits. He knew which store closed a few minutes early, which employee usually forgot to unlock the back door, where the blind cameras were. He became a kind of expert in invisibility. During the early hours of the morning, while the mall was closed, he would walk through restricted areas, looking for leftover food, and update his hiding place with objects he found discarded, broken fans that he fixed, old shelves, even a minibar that someone had abandoned. He also started recording everything in a notebook. It was as if it were a secret project, his experiment in living in the heart of one of the greatest symbols of modern capitalism, but on the fringes of it. In the first 2 years, he almost got caught a few times. On one occasion, a security guard almost entered the room where he slept, but Daniel managed to simulate a problem with the electrical wiring and make it look like it was just a technical failure. On another occasion, he had to hide for 18 hours straight after an employee found one of his utensils in a service corridor. But over time, he became more careful, more meticulous, to the point that he began to believe he would never be discovered. The most intriguing thing is that Daniel was not a man in pain, at least not in the way we imagine. Over the years, he developed a routine. He read forgotten books in the mall's secondhand bookstore, listened to music through the speakers in the corridors, created a handmade calendar with days of the week marked on cardboard. He began to observe customers and write stories about them. He created fictitious profiles of people he saw every day. The woman in the flowery dress who always ate lunch alone, the man in the suit who seemed too anxious, the teenager who spent hours looking at shop windows but never bought anything. Daniel fed on the lives of others. And so the years passed. The mall's management changed twice. Stores were opened and closed. The architecture was remodeled in some areas. But Daniel's secret room was never touched. It wasn't even listed in the updated plans. He became an invisible legend, a specter hidden in the details that no one sees. The most impressive part of the story came in the 9th year. Daniel found an old box with documents forgotten in a warehouse that had been closed for decades. Inside, there were files from former store owners, plans that had never been updated, and even secrets from contracts that had never been revealed. He began to study everything as if it were modern archaeology. And then he found something curious, a document that showed that the area where he lived officially did not belong to the mall. It was an extension that should have been demolished and incorporated into another plot of land, but the project was never carried out. Technically, that part was outside the site's plan and administrative control. Daniel realized that, legally, he was living in a kind of no man's land. And that's when he decided to write his story, not out of vanity, but because he felt he needed to record it. He spent months typing everything into an old notebook that he reassembled himself with discarded parts. He created a document of hundreds of pages recounting, in detail, how he survived for a decade invisibly. When he finished, he decided it was time to leave, not because he wanted attention, but because he felt the experiment had come to an end. Daniel was discovered in 2020. He turned himself in. He left a letter to the mall's management explaining everything, attached his full story, and calmly waited in the food court for security to arrive. They didn't know how to react. The case made national headlines for days. The press called him the invisible man of the mall. Many thought it was a hoax, but the evidence was there. The secret room, the documents, the diary with dates, names, even old photos that he took secretly with an analog camera that ran on batteries. And the most unexpected thing was the public's reaction. Daniel was not arrested. The mall's management, after consulting with lawyers, decided not to prosecute him. Instead, the case became the subject of academic studies. Universities wanted to understand how someone managed to live for so long inside a commercial structure without being noticed. Documentaries were produced, and Daniel himself became a kind of guest speaker at events on architecture, human behavior, and social invisibility. Today, Daniel lives a simple life in a house in the countryside. He published a book about his story, which became a bestseller. He doesn't consider himself a hero, nor does he want to be a symbol of anything. But he says he learned, in practice, something that no one teaches in college. Empty spaces, forgotten corridors, and places where no one looks say much more about a society than its main halls. And this is the true story of a man who spent 10 years hidden inside a shopping mall without anyone noticing. A story that forces us to look at the corners where we usually don't see. Because sometimes, that's where life really happens.